Welcome to She Leads with Grace. I am your host, Gemma Macaulay, and I am on a mission to help women take the lead in their own life by owning their feminine genius and reclaiming the power of womanhood. It's time for women to rediscover the value they bring and pursue the life they are called to create.
Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to episode 6 of She Leads with Grace. Today, I'm joined by Chantal Howard, based in North Idaho. She just has a wealth of wisdom. She is a wife of 7. You still homeschool, right? Homeschool the little ones. And she is a coach for not only Catholic women, not only for women who are pursuing leadership, but also for teenage girls and for young adults who are pursuing holiness in their daily lives. So welcome, Chantal. Thank you so much for joining.
I'm excited to be here. We've had to troubleshoot.
I really had to hone in on adaptability and resilience and just, move forward. But we eventually got there in the end. So let's.
Yeah, lots of coaching ourselves through.
I know.
Heck, all the things.
Right. I should probably also mention that you were previously my coach earlier this year. So
Yeah.
a lot of what I have been able to cultivate is because of what you've taught me and the example that you lead by. And I would love to just delve into the topics that we covered when we worked together and the things that we are both really passionate about. So I think I'd like to start by having you share a little bit about your background, how you came to meet your husband, how family life has evolved and how you come to journey through your journey of entrepreneurship.
The biggest thing is I grew up with just a real do-it-yourself kind of attitude. And a lot of that, I think, comes from the fact that I was raised in a family of entrepreneurs. And so whether it was homeschooling or work or birth, or even when my little brother passed away, my family's mentality was we're doing this ourselves. We're doing this differently than just however the rest of the world has dictated that life has to be done. And so I kind of always had a little bit of that spirit of entrepreneurship baked in. And at the same time, it really it correlated with the spirit of my faith as well, right? Which is not just, floating downstream, but swimming uphill, swimming up the current. And so part of that is just what launched my life into lots of different adventures. I ended up discerning religious vocation as a young girl, starting around the age of 16. I guess maybe back up one more step. When I was 12, I lived away from home and trained as a gymnast. It's a real intensive discipline atmosphere, and competed on the national stage, which kind of prepared my mind and my heart for bigger things, because most young people don't have that kind of pressure. So by the time I was 16, I was like, let's get on with it. Let's figure out what life's, what's my real mission? I knew by that time that sport wasn't enough. There was an aspect of it that was really satisfying, but the Lord was really pulling my heart towards something higher. And so I discerned religious life in Europe, which, being an American and spending time overseas and just kind of outside of my normal milieu really stretched me, and studied philosophy and theology there while I was there, which opened my mind to such, just contemplation of life and purpose and the meaning of what, where we exist. And
do you mind sharing which particular order you were discerning with?
Yeah, I spent time with the community of St. John, the sisters, the contemplative sisters. I also spent time with another order kind of for a brief visit with the community of Beatitudes, which was were newer communities. Both have gone through some shakeups and some different challenges. The community of St. John in particular, after I left, went through a lot of turmoil, and they're in recovery mode. So I just say that as a caveat to your audience, because I do think that the community is a beautiful community, and their mission and their charisms and so forth are really reemerging. But so when I was there, it was still in very much a healthy and vibrant experience for me. Afterwards, there were some things that, leadership challenges, and nobody seems to be exempt from these types of challenges. And so suffice it to say, it was more of a contemplative experience, though. So a lot of solitude, a lot of deep introspective learning about myself. And then because they had a particular academic dimension, spending a lot of time in classes, philosophy, theology, like I said. And So a lot of, again, it was really where I discovered that I wanted to be able to think about deep things and discuss deep topics and really understand the inner workings of the human mind and heart. And then I came back to the States after that experience, and I had a really powerful experience there, actually. Asked for, on the Feast of St. Therese, I asked for something in English. My French at that point was still pretty rough and is still rough, but I wanted something in English. I needed something to consume that was just in my language because I had been really stripped from anything that was familiar to me at the time. And my angel sister handed me a book and she said, "This is the only thing we have in English." And it was called Story of a Family. And it was about Louis and Zellie Martin and their life and their conversion, their romance, their vocation, their family dynamics. And as I read this, and I was, of course, they're discerning a religious vocation, I was kind of like, "Hey, Lord, I'll keep reading." And before I knew it, I was so inspired. I was like, I'm going to write a rule of life for families. And it became really clear to me during that discernment period, I was called to be in a family. I really knew that. I didn't know the specifics, but it was very clear to me that the Lord wanted me to be the mother superior of my own family. And so I was very, again, just pretty idealistic, but just inspired, and every good dream has to start with that idealism, right? We have to have a standard. We have to have something high calling us on. So while I can look back and say, well, it's kind of naive of me to think that I could live this lofty, holy married life, I realize now that that was essential, even though what came after was totally humbling and real life. I always call it from ideal to real. And that's what happened. I came back to the States. I ended up choosing to enter into courtship with this young man who'd been pursuing me, young as in 10 years older than me. And we got married within, I guess we courted for 8 months, and then we were engaged for 8 months and we got married. And he had been discerning simultaneously to me the priesthood. So we both kind of had, again, lots of ideals. Our courtship was rather fanciful and special, and holy hours and letters and beautiful music and, everything but practical. And so as soon as we got married, we were like, oh, I married a human. And he thought, he was the novice master and I was the novice. And, we kind of clashed, and it was hard. It was a hard first year of marriage. It was a hard, in a lot of respects, it's been what I call the mountain of marriage, and we're still climbing. Let's see, yesterday would have been 24 years since we were engaged. So, 23 years married, and we still have this tussle between the ideal and the real, and what it is, and how do we reconcile that? And one of the big realities we've had to confront is just the notion of mercy, right? Just mercy, lots and lots of mercy. We are just perpetually at each other's need for mercy. But I will say, and this is a good little segue into my work as a coach, somewhere along the line of our challenging marriage, we encountered marriage coaching, and that introduced me to the world of coaching. And I really resonated with this idea that we could change our thinking, and by changing our thinking, change our behavior. And it was forward focused, not so much a constant, perpetual stirring up of the past, but more of, hey, let's give you tools that you can implement and you can grow forward with. And so I became very much not only immersed in learning these tools for myself, but of wanting to share them. And so I started coaching. I started coaching first and foremost in the health space. I was a health coach in the midst of having babies. By the way, I was 18 when we got married, and baby at 19, baby at 21, they just started coming, right? And so in the midst of motherhood and marriage, there was this longing in my heart for contribution, of course, entrepreneurship. I was always they always called me the project lady. I always had a project, something I was working on. And to this day, I have too many projects for my own good. It's just the nature of being a multi-passionate person. The coaching piece in particular, I would say, has not only saved my marriage, I would say it has healed me as a human being in so many ways, because I had to get very close to the fact that I cannot control someone else. I can only control myself. And in controlling my thoughts, in surrendering, in learning how to like truly engage my intellect and my will for the good of the other, I could love through really difficult circumstances. And yeah, it's been a guiding light for me in so many
Oh, it's
ways. Blessing to be able to train and teach others as well.
so beautiful. I'd love to hear like more about just like how you took the tools that you received through marriage coaching. Could you share maybe like the most helpful tool that you got
Mhm.
from that experience and how it helped your marriage?
Yeah. Well, initially, one of the things that I realized is the very first point of reference with it was to assess. So that was the first step, was just an assessment. They asked us just to like share where we're at. And for us to honestly look at that was just a perfect way to begin. The beginning of wisdom is self-knowledge, is having this sense of awareness of where you really are. And believe it or not, we oftentimes don't stop to assess. So I think assessment is a really good thing. And just putting out, this is how I feel. This is where we're at. This is what has happened. This is where I'm frustrated. This is where the breakdown seems to be. And being able to look at, our marriage or myself individually or anyone doing an assessment of any part of their life, you begin to go, oh, all right, I have to own my part in this. I have to own my responsibility in this. And that was the next step, is they really took us into a deep inventory of what they called a personal examination of conscience within the context of our marriage. So I had to look at our marriage only through my lens of what I'm responsible
Mm.
for contributing. So it's very easy, right? We always can see the speck in our neighbor's eye and our husband's eye, but can we see ourselves? And so that kind of led to this exercise of us mutually getting on our knees before each other and confessing our part in it. Radical personal responsibility. And from there, a lot of healing took place almost immediately, right? Because it just allowed me to see that he could see himself, and vice versa. And I became very quickly attuned to this notion that no matter what's going on in any given moment, in any circumstance, this person in front of me is perfectly lovable. God is loving them. And so if I can't, I can at least surrender my idea of what I think is wrong and say, Lord, you're loving them right now. I'm going to borrow your lens. Give me your eyes. Help me to see. And the way I translate that more in just coaching world is teaching individuals to enter into the thought process of another person. Very rarely when we go over into the brain of another person do we find that they're sitting there contemplating malice and really seeking to ruin our lives. More often than not, we discover they're wounded, they're hurt, they're misunderstood, they're frustrated. They too have a longing and a desire for what's right, but there's some sort of, miscommunication. And so, that was one of, again, kind of a progression of exercises that really then helped us to begin to identify that what we're bringing to our relationship is very much our own responsibility. From there, we could begin to let the other person deal with what they have to deal with, their personality traits, their struggle. And I could begin to go, I don't have to let his stuff mean what I've used to let it mean, right? I could contextualize it in my brain and go, he's having a rough day. Or that's the personality that he was given. And that's a cross for him. I can help him carry that versus like blame him or feel like it's somehow a personal affront against me, and allowed for a lot of maturing to take place. And I mean, trust me, by no means perfect. I fall prey to the arguments and, the jabs or the this or the that all the time. But I can also let things just wash over me much easier. And one of the common refrains in the coaching world is that nobody makes you feel anything. We make a decision to let ourselves feel something. So if he says something to me, I interpret that as, oh, he's such a jerk. Well, that's my thought. That doesn't, I could also just be like, he's having a hard day. That's a decision I get to make. And so that's kind of the, I don't know, the crux of where it led. It led to me being able to handle and live with a very passionate person, both of us, as you could tell, very passionate. And so, that's been a beautiful thing too, though. We have 7 beautiful children, talented. And I think they would all tell you that the hallmark of our marriage is that they watch us mess up and reconcile on a regular basis. And they just know that we'll never give up.
Mm. I think it's so important for kids to watch that, like to see how you deal with conflict and learn from you the tools that you apply to your particular situations. Like when I grew up, my parents, like, I never saw them fight. They
Mm,
would do it behind closed doors. They didn't want to have any sort of, I don't know why they decided to do that, but in my mind, I think maybe they just didn't want to have us experience hardship or like a trauma experience from seeing your parents fight and you feel a bit like insecure. There's a bit of instability there. Like, who knows what led them to like decide to do things that way. But I feel like I was deprived of learning how to actually deal with conflict. And now it's like threatening to me.
mm,
My husband is very passionate and he and his family, they put everything out there. They just tell you how it is. They tell you how they feel. And then because they've put it all out there, they know where they stand. And then
mm,
eventually they do come back together again. They do reconcile because they've wrestled. But
mhm.
without that wrestle, it's like you naturally do suppress, what you're experiencing. And so I think there is a real gift in being able to demonstrate how you manage conflict and disagreements and, just normal human interactions
Yeah.
that are healthy.
Yeah.
And I think just like learning these like tools and even just taking responsibility for your own actions it does take maturity, but it also takes awareness. And I think one of the things I'd like to touch on is like, how do you actually think about what you're thinking? Like, how
Mm,
do you practice seeing things from a wider perspective where you can take ownership of your own contribution, not just to relationships, but also just to how you're living your life?
mm,
And then how to move forward from there. Like, how does the thought process practice actually help you take personal ownership?
mm. Really good question. And that's one of the things that I remember having this moment when I was homeschooled as well. So that was another part of my story. But at some point during my homeschool journey, somebody said, "What does it mean to think?" I was like, "Well, I don't know." What does that mean? And he just described it. He said it's asking yourself questions. And so I think there's something really true to that, that when we get better at asking ourselves questions, whether it's in the silence of our musings, or in my opinion, even in a better format would be like journaling, right? We begin to hear what it is that is rattling around inside our brain and is emerging from a lot of subconscious processing. Most of what we experience in our brain is a subconscious happening, right? Like we just, it just kind of shows up and we're like, where'd that come from? And the unprocessed thought process, we just say things like, well, that's just how I am. We just write it off as like, I was just made that way. That's just the way I am. And it's like, wait, hold on. Why? What am I thinking? How do I feel? What should I feel? What do I want? What don't I want? Right? Like these are the types of things that we have to learn how to ask ourselves so that we can get clear on actually what we want to show up in our lives and which frame of thinking we want to stick with.
Mm.
Otherwise, it happens to us. And we, in a certain sense, are victims of our own circumstances and of our own thinking that is uncontrolled. So I think it's about asking questions, to be totally honest. So for me, I don't claim to have it mastered, but often being that I'm a mom and I'm talking to my kids a lot of times, I often try to boil things down into ways that they can understand. And so I'll ask them, say, okay, take a minute and I want you just to float up above yourself. Like imagine if you were just watching yourself in this situation. You're in the kitchen and Papa asks you to load the dishwasher, but he didn't ask you very nice or whatever. And so you get uptight, you're frustrated, and then you snap, right? Whatever the scenario is. And as you watch yourself, you ask yourself, is that really how I want to show up? Is this really serving me? What would be better? Right. And of course, most of that's done retrospectively after challenging things happen in our lives. But we begin to close the gap between when something happens and when we reflect to the point that we start almost experiencing it in real time, which is, I'm shouting right now and I know I shouldn't. this isn't really a great idea. Why am I following? And you can almost become attuned to the fact that you're like, I'm doing it to myself right now. And that's when we get better and better at going, oh, hold on. Now I'm going to bite my tongue before I let it out. And I'm going to make a choice. I'm actually going to choose what to say. And, over the course of a lifetime of practice, I think we can get better at that. The sooner we teach that skill of not only, again, of assessing, but of evaluating in the moment and learning to see what's happening, the more temperance I think we can exercise. And sometimes we may choose to just go down the path. I mean, there's times when we need to vent our anger or say the thing or establish the boundary or say something that is perhaps, I'm not talking about teaching our children just to be stoic. That's, or ourselves. And I think that sometimes is the feeling is like it's either I'm, a total stoic individual with no feeling and emotion or passion, or I let it all out uncontrollably. Somewhere in there is moderation and peace.
Would you use that similar approach when you are managing overwhelm? Like when you have all these things sort of happening all at once and they feel like they're just getting on top of you, you don't really know how to sort of think clearly. Like, how would you go about thinking through the process of being in a state of overwhelm and thinking, what do I actually do in this moment? How do I move forward? How do I simplify this? Or, can you give an example of how you do that yourself?
For sure. I think that we've kind of become overwhelm phobic, right? We like this idea we can never be overwhelmed, or that if we're overwhelmed, it's always a big problem. I think that life and the Lord in his wisdom allows us to be overwhelmed a lot. He's like, here, 1 baby, 2 babies, 7 babies, you can handle it, right? And we go, I'm not so sure. No, being overwhelmed is, it's just like any other state of emotion where we can either learn from it and begin to redirect it, or we can allow it to spiral us deeper and actually we create more overwhelm and we actually make it worse. And so I think you're right on. It's in the same moment that we are going through a moment of overwhelm. Maybe, I can think of recently, my husband was gone on pilgrimage. I had one that had pneumonia. I had another one that was away. I had my newborn. I had to keep coaching. I had another kid that was in the middle of soccer trials. Like, there was a lot of moving pieces. And of course, want the house done and everybody needs to eat and all of the things that were happening, not to mention 6 businesses in the background brewing. Whoa, right? It could just make me snap. And instead it's like, I got this. I'm good at juggling one thing at a time. One thing at a time. What do I have to do right now? Like just learning to focus on the present moment versus seeing it all at once. Just telling you about that makes me I'm like, my life is a little crazy. But instead of seeing it in the mayhem, instead of looking at it all at once, we learn to focus. And this is the part of our brain, we call it the reticular activating system, right? Where we actually decide what we're focusing on. So with the kids, if we go, okay, let's start looking for yellow cars, all of a sudden, we're driving and it's like, oh, yellow car, yellow car, yellow car. And before you know it, after the game's over, your brain's still looking for the yellow cars. And you're like, oh my gosh, I've been seeing yellow cars all day, because I put my focus on it and I see what I want when I tell my brain what to look for. And so I think the same thing is true when we're feeling overwhelmed is we go, okay, I can either sit here and see it all and go crazy, or I can start to narrow my gaze and look at the next piece in front of me. I got to calm that baby down because he's screaming. And that's all I have to worry about right now. In the next 5 minutes, my gaze is going to shift back to I've got to keep making dinner. And then it's, I've got to console this teenage heart. And then it's, I've got to wipe this baby who just went potty. And then, right. And we just go from successive moment to moment where nothing is ever overwhelming us completely because we've learned to just stay attentive to the demand in front of us. Now, that's in the moment. Of course, I think we do need to learn how to have seasons and moments when we pause and we reassess our systems and we reassess what is happening, what is on our plate. And I coach a lot of women who, when we sit down and look at it, it's not like you can just nix your kids, or just empty your plate. A lot of women have to work, have to attune to their families, have husbands, have homes, have responsibilities. And there's not a lot of options in terms of just canceling certain things. But we can get attuned to perhaps where we're robbing ourselves of time. And most of the time it's in our thoughts and our anxiety that ends up costing us the most.
Yeah. I think it's also a discipline to focus in and to really hone in on doing that yourself. And I think I wanted to pivot a little bit because I think that mentality is something that can be applied to any particular situation. And I think one of the things I wanted to delve in on is the pursuit of, things that are on your heart, like desires that are on your heart that you want to do, but you keep putting it off because of these thought processes that you are constantly
Mm.
engaging in, whether it's intentional or not, whether it's fear based or whether it's legitimately not the right time. But, how do you discern when is the right time to pursue things? As I find that with, I mean, I am speaking for myself as a new mum who has sort of like gotten the grip of where my life is at. I feel like I'm in a very creative phase right now, but there is also this tension of like, I want to be present at home, but I want to do this. And I don't know if I'm actually coming from a place of purity. Like, how can you discern whether you are ready to actually go after the things that you are desiring?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think first and foremost, of course, prayer, right? The discipline of prayer is key. And whether this looks like a focused sitting down with the Lord and saying, is this the season for me to pursue this or not? It's learning to just be attentive to how the Lord speaks in your life. What is the Spirit speaking to you? Where is the peace coming? Do you feel the quote unquote energy emerging that says, hey, I'm excited to do this. I'm wanting to pursue this. And that's the spark, right? Is inspiration, making yourself available to be inspired. And I think that's really important because I often coach from the perspective of what is the dream that is being given to you, resting on your heart, being unearthed within you versus let's just sit down and come up with something, right? Now, it's not wrong to teach or to help someone discover the process of dreaming again. How do we do that? Well, we again kind of go through that same process we talked about. We assess, what do you want? What don't you want? Where are you at? What are your skills? What are your strengths? What are your passions? Those are all good questions. But ultimately, I think, especially for the faithful woman who's in the middle of pursuing all out her vocation of holiness within the home, it's a delicate thing. We have to hear the call and respond to the inspiration. So I really think that's key. I mean, I'm a multi-passionate person. I've got 10 dreams bubbling all the time. And not all of them can have my attention. Many of them are what I call parking lot ideas, where I'm like, oh, we should do that. Oh, I got to set it over here in the parking lot. Maybe someday when I have bandwidth or the funds or the team or whatever it might be. And so, I think learning, first of all, to be inspired is key, and asking yourself what it is that is brewing inside of you. Because I do think desires in general are from the Lord. They may need matured or altered or even, again, set aside for seasons, but He doesn't give everybody the same desires, right? I have a different desire, even just the desire for business or for sales or for authorship or whatever it is. Like, I've got these dreams that my friend down the street, she doesn't have. And therefore, there's something in me that has been knit into me, into the fiber of who I am, that is unique to me, that I have a responsibility to unearth. And that's what I would say to moms is, yes, you're called to be a mom. And yes, that is your highest duty. And if you compromise that for the sake of another pursuit, in the very stern words of I think his name was Bishop Cousins, you will go to hell, right? If you compromise your vocation, ultimately that's wrong. But that doesn't mean that your vocation doesn't have room in it for you to pursue extraordinary things. And oftentimes things of high value. It would be silly to say, oh, I'm a mom, so I can't. No, you're a mom. so you can, right? Your motherhood is fuel and fodder for your dreams. That's the way I'd like to think about it.
I'd love to delve into that because I think it just seems like a bit of a paradox where like motherhood fuels your passions, but it's like this kid is taking up all my energy. How can this be fuel?
Yeah, seems like a great big distraction. Yeah, no, you're right. It's very true. I mean, obviously, motherhood is in and of itself its own taxing demand, and again, sometimes we want to just distract ourselves from it with another hobby or a project or something. And I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I think we need outlets. We need outlets
Mm,
for the pent up little kid world we get stuck in sometimes. Want adult conversation. We want something creative to come out of us other than, the baby talk. you know, I often used to tease. I was like, I have a prayer life of a 4-year-old. Dear Jesus, I love you. Thank you for this day. Amen. It's like, okay, can we get any deeper here? And so we do have desire to go deeper, and the Lord is keenly aware of that. And I think that sometimes he gives us that freedom and that permission, and other times he asks us to wait. And those seasons are, again, how do we discern? I would say the hallmark is the fruits of the spirit. When I think about this dream, when I begin to exercise focusing on it, when I give my time to it, do I feel at peace? Is my charity still intact? Or am I like, hey, shush, I got to do this thing, right? You're in my way. That's probably a pretty telltale sign that either you need to come up with better systems or maybe it's not the right moment. We've got to, and I just want to caveat this as, again, none of us are going to ever do it perfect. I certainly don't. I get caught on my phone and my kids come in and ask me for something. And I'm like, what? Oh, what do you need, love? Let me set this aside. This isn't important, right? Learning to discern is an active process of trying and failing. And that's it's never going to be like, this is what you should do. Let's just, everything's set aside. Try, and you're going to fail, and you're going to pick up, and you're going to expand on that failure, either by saying, I need to set it down for a time, or I'm going to do better by making sure that my environment is situated so I can succeed, or my schedule is better organized, or I have help, or
mm.
I, sacrifice other things that are perhaps just leisure to me that, I replace it with something productive. So I discern actively, be inspired, allow yourself to be inspired, look at the desires of your heart, and then try, get in there, try.
I think that's just like the perfect point to leave it on because that's just like the most practical application that can immediately be applied. And I just want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your just the generosity of your just sharing your experiences and insight of your own world. And I'm just so grateful to have had this time with you. And thank you so much for being here again. Really appreciate it.
And thank you for doing this. I can't tell you how inspired I am. You picking up this podcast, stepping out there, and continuing to charge forward. It's very edifying for me as well. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Oh, great. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank
Lots
you
of
very
love.
much. See you later.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I'm curious. Do you feel like you're in a bit of a rut? Are you craving to do things differently but seem to be getting the same results time and time again? Are you bored of life? For a limited time only, I am offering a 12-week coaching package where you can have the chance to assess where your life is at, get crystal clear on your direction for this season, and create a plan of action to follow through with consistency so you can attain self-confidence, conviction of purpose, and elevate how you live every day. You will receive personal support and accountability from me as a trained coach, so you are guaranteed to follow through and get results that will transform your life and strengthen your self-image. If you are interested or just want to have a chat, send me a DM on Instagram at @GemmaMacaulay_, or you can schedule a call with me using the link in the show notes. I look forward to chatting with you on the next episode.